When we consider, I guess, first, the most immediate deal that seems to be on the table between Iran and Oman over the Strait of Hormuz, is it one you feel can be relied on? Is it a good one?
I'm not sure anything can be relied on in the Middle East. And even the question whether it's a good one, the question is whether it's a good enough one or whether it's the least bad one. And if the goal is to get the Strait of Hormuz open, which it should be, before the war, about 1/5 of the world's oil and gas traveled through it, plus a lot of other cargo. The idea that Iran would have a larger role now than it did then, I think, is inevitable. Wars have consequences. Iran will have a larger role even without charging a toll or a fee or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think it's something that's acceptable. We'll have to drop our blockade, and in my view, is we should drop our blockade so long as Iran lets others use the Strait of Hormuz. We'll have to let them sell some oil as long as most of the other sanctions stay in place. I think that's probably as good as we can expect at this point.
Richard, it's great to have you back. What do you make of this move, strategically speaking, by Iran to just stop dealing with the U.S. and make a deal with its neighbor, Oman? Is this shrewd? What does the administration choose for its next play?
Well, what I would do is actually take a page out of Iran's book. There's such a poisonous quality to U.S.-Iranian interaction. I would say we actually ought to multilateralize this. It should not simply be Iran and Oman. It should not simply be Iran and the United States. The world, and certainly all the countries of the region, have a stake in transit through the Strait of Hormuz. So what I would like us to do is enlist others diplomatically. Get the Arab states of the region, who have an enormous stake in what goes through there. Maybe get the Europeans, get the Asians, people from Asia who import enormous amounts of energy from the Middle East, and have them all involved. So that way it's not simply Iran against the United States. I want it to be, in many ways, Iran against a big chunk of the world.
Well, and almost as if they could hear you, a U.S. official now telling Bloomberg that Hormuz is an international waterway and that no party controls Hormuz lanes or transiting, and that temporary Hormuz routes will be without impediment. So it's unclear if that's maybe signaling that the U.S. isn't necessarily liking what it's hearing here on the Iran and Omani front, Richard. But to your point about this being of global concern, who is it that needs to initiate such a thing? If we are to get all of these different parties at the table, is that a U.S.-led effort? Is that a UN-led effort? And why would it be an effort that Iran might be willing to cooperate with?
I would say to the U.S., could be European-led, could be countries, again, that of the region, could be Saudi and others led. Iran may not like it. Again, they have, though, a stake in opening the Strait of Hormuz, certainly so for two reasons. They want their own oil and gas to be exported. And second of all, ultimately, they want to collect a fee. So this has become a big wartime objective of theirs. So I don't think this is impossible by any means. So sure, I would push for it. Again, I don't think we have a whole lot of leverage. And all these threats of military force you had the president on a few minutes ago, quite honestly, are empty. Iran has absorbed an awful lot of punishment and to little avail. And we can't escalate against Iran's energy infrastructure, because the last thing in the world we want them to do is to attack the energy and water infrastructure of the neighboring countries. So these threats are they're empty. And all they do is raise questions about American credibility. So I would put them aside, and I would focus on other things, some diplomacy. I'd focus on longer-term steps to reduce the importance of the Strait of Hormuz. We should encourage new ports, new pipelines, increased production of oil and gas from other parts of the world. We ought to be taking steps to improve the ability of local countries to defend themselves. In the short run, we're going to have to accept an outsized Iranian role. Again, wars have consequences. But over time, we ought to be focused on reducing Iranian leverage over the neighbors and over the Strait, and then turn the focus to their nuclear program. That's ultimately as important, even more important than what happens with the Strait.
Well, we know you're no stranger to Middle East wars, Richard, with your book, War of Necessity, War of Choice, which I think I see behind you there. I'm curious your take on this argument over munitions The Washington Post today, the president's very upset about it, talking about the president boiling over at Camp David, yelling at Pete Hegseth about the lack of munitions. We know that we have run short or completely empty, according to Reuters, of ATACMS missiles and other long-range missiles are simply expended. Is this a result of our lack of defense industrial base or a war that has been mismanaged?
Well, this is an unfortunate war that never should have been fought, but you're exactly right. What it really reflects is that we don't have the ability to produce significant numbers of weapons at reasonable prices in small amounts of time. We have a defense establishment. When Dwight Eisenhower gave his farewell address, he talked about a military-industrial complex. We have a military-industrial legislative complex. And by the time these three institutions get together, the Congress, the large firms, and the U.S. military establishment, we are inefficient and we're not nearly innovative enough. And the fact that countries like Iran are producing large numbers of these effective systems. Look at what Ukraine is doing. Ukraine is producing what? 6-7 million drones a year for tens of thousands of dollars each. Why aren't we doing that? So actually, I think this highlights a scandal, if you will, that's been bipartisan. It's happened over decades. We've got to revamp and reorient our manufacturing base to essentially position us for contemporary warfare. And this war is a belated wake-up call.
Well, you mentioned Ukraine, Richard, in our final moment with you. This lack of munitions and defensive ones, especially that the U.S. experiencing, does have consequence for Ukraine, right, which desperately needs these defensive interceptors, as evidenced by the missile strikes we've seen Russia be able to conduct and civilians dying in Kyiv. What does this ultimately mean for Ukraine's ability to try to last here, to get to a diplomatic outcome?
Ukraine is almost defenseless against Russian ballistic missiles that are produced maybe at the rate of about 100 a month. So one thing is, can we help Ukraine target the missile production plants? That's one thing. And two, Ukraine has to keep attacking Russia in Crimea, its energy infrastructure, ultimately to make Russia come to the point where it has to think about a ceasefire. That even though it can inflict pain on Ukraine, it also will have to suffer enormous consequences itself. That is potentially the preconditions of getting this war to move towards a ceasefire. We ought to help Ukraine get to that point.